fights through the screen. Cunningham gets the ball, gets Bam, pulls up for the win. Got it! Detroit basketball. Look at this. From center ice, it's Patrick Kane in Chicago. Oh my God! With the overtime winner. Time that they didn't. And first and goal, and the inside run for Gibbs, still going to the goal line. Number 4 on the night. A night to remember. Runner goes, pitch is swung on, a high fly ball to right field. This one is gonna fly! A 3-run home run! Kerry Carpenter!
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Detroit Sports Sit Down. My name is Tom Murphy Jr. I'm Dan Murphy with me, and we are talking some sports today. Some Detroit Tigers, man. It's the hottest thing going right now in Detroit. These guys are on fire, perhaps the hottest team in the league. Still got the best record in baseball right now, I believe, which is fantastic. We just jumped up to a 10 and a half.
9.5.
Not 9.5. 10, yeah, because Cleveland jumped over Minnesota last night. So 9.5 over Cleveland, 10 over Minnesota. I think Kansas City's right there at 11. So those three teams are a little just bulked up with each other, with the Tigers clearly ahead of the AL Central, which is just a beautiful thing. The pitching continues to be great. The clutch hitting. Last night's game was some fireworks. Javi Baez, oh man, 2 home runs. This guy might make the All-Star game, man. Very, very exciting stuff, man. So we're definitely talking some Tigers. Today we're also going to talk some college football. It's a real interesting topic right now for people that love college football but are kind of getting a little like discouraged with how the system is, and how the playoff system, how I know people really wanted it like in the past, but now it's turning into one of those, be careful what you wish for type situations. So we're going to get into that, and then at the end we are going to talk some Pistons, with the NBA Finals about to wrap up here. The off season is about to get going, and the Pistons, they're in a very interesting situation right now as far as their team, the roster, and what the future holds. So we're going to get into that a bit. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Detroit Sports Sit Down. Dan, how are you doing today, my friend?
Good. It seems like we got some storms rolling here on a Wednesday afternoon. Not quite as nice as we had it last week, but yeah, not too bad, man. I'm just ready to talk some Detroit sports.
Yeah. So let's get right underway with these Tigers. With the way things are going, you know, it's a really good situation that the Tigers are in, but with baseball, you can always improve, and there was a trade that went down in the past few days between Boston and San Francisco that really intrigued, I think, a lot of Tiger fans, because that trade, if the Tigers were involved with Boston, that is a trade that could have really impacted this team. So, Dan, why don't you kind of break down that trade and then give your opinion on maybe if the Tigers should have made a run at that trade?
Well, what's fascinating about everything that happened with Rafael Devers is it goes back to February and really just the entire offseason when, Alex Bregman sweepstakes were going on. And obviously, as we know as Tiger fans, how badly the Tigers were going after Bregman. And we talked about last week how perfect Bregman would be, in the Tigers organization right now as a power hitting third baseman, right-handed hitter, everything they could want for. And that's why they went for him so hard. Well, it was Boston that came in out of nowhere and gave Bregman a contract and gave him, $40 million a year without an opt-out after the first year. And Bregman took it. Now, Was there conversations between the Red Sox organization and Devers, who is their face of the franchise and their third baseman, and signed a 10-year contract to be their third baseman? Well, it appears that they didn't really have very good conversations, or the communication wasn't very good, because Devers was pretty pissed and he did not want to move off of third base. And you're not going to sign Alex Bregman to not play third base. He's one of the best defensive third basemen in the game. So when they asked him, hey, are you going to move? Will you play DH? And he just flat out said no. And this was back in February. So this has been a saga throughout the entire year, and they've been dealing with Devers, and then uh, Boston's first baseman, Casas got hurt. I believe he tore his ACL and was out for the year. And they asked him, hey, we need you to move to first base. He refused. He refused to move to first base. So again, like, this is just something that Boston has done to themselves from the offseason, and not communicating to their best player, their face of the franchise. So they had to move him. In their eyes, they had to move him, despite him being the best hitter on the team, despite them coming off a sweep of the Yankees and really getting themselves back into contention here. They make a blockbuster, shocking move and send Devers to the Giants for really very little. You could say probably a bag of baseballs, but you know what I mean? Like, they're just not a lot going back to Boston, and it's really just feels like more of a salary dump, and more of, hey, this guy's just not happy here. We're not happy with him. We want him gone. And San Francisco was happy to swoop in and take him. And you look at the Tiger situation, it's like, okay, they need a third baseman. They need a power hitter in their lineup. Yeah, they're the best team in baseball right now, but you can see at times where that lineup can get shut down. And they could really use a power hitter in that middle of the lineup. So you wonder if, like, hey, maybe the Tigers could have stepped in and tried to get Devers. I think they definitely could have put a better package together, in terms of prospects. The Tigers are the best farm system in the game. They could have put a pretty good package together to get Devers if they wanted him. But the question is, should the Tigers have gone for him? And I don't know. I think they at least should have asked and saw what it would have cost to get him.
Was that okay? So for one, like, I was reading like the trade analysis, and San Francisco, they did give up like um like pitching prospects, but guys that, even though they were like, considered top prospects, they weren't really showing that on the field. Like, what do you think a package for Devers from the Tigers would have looked like in comparison to what San Francisco gave away?
I mean, in comparison to what the Giants gave away, I mean, maybe a Montero and a Hyu Lee, the third baseman that's in Toledo right now, and Montero, who's kind of been the fifth, sixth starter on the Tigers. And then maybe some lower end prospects that are not anywhere near the top 100, probably not even near the top 20.
So you're not
Like,
even talking about the top guys where,
no, you're not talking Max Clark. You're not talking McGonigal. You're not talking any of those type guys. In terms of this trade, I think it's more like back end of this rotation starters, like a Montero, that can fill in for the Red Sox now just to give them some pitching depth. But outside of that, they didn't give up, top tier prospects. Like, it's like, it really, to me, it looks like a salary dump in a lot of ways. I think the Red Sox wanted to get out of this contract, and there just was a lot of, contention between both sides, between Devers and the organization, and they just wanted to get out of it.
why do you think that this trade went down so early? What was it just, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. So I wonder if like other teams in the league, including the Tigers, even had a chance to put a package together. Why do you think this trade went down like so early before the trade deadline? Was it just the discon like the dissension between the player and the franchise was so bad that it had to be done immediately, and they just took the first thing offered?
I mean, that's what it feels like. I mean, I have to imagine teams showed some interest. I mean, everybody knows about this since before the season started, that Devers was unhappy. So you would think that some teams have been calling and asking, but this seemed that it's not like they just put him out in the trade market, and there wasn't rumors going around like, hey, he's available. So the fact that the Giants just kind of swooped in and gave this kind of low ball offer and got him, it's really surprising. And that's why I wonder how many other teams really called, or at least in the last week or so. Like, it doesn't seem like the Red Sox like played that deal off. Like, hey, the Giants are giving this, and then called other teams like, hey, what are you willing to offer? It doesn't feel like that went on. It feels like the Giants, hey, offered this offer. Maybe they went back a little bit back and forth with the Giants a little bit over some names, and they just went ahead and did it. Like, could this be an ownership situation where the owner came in and said, hey, this is just bad PR. I don't want this guy around. I don't want this guy in my organization. I want him gone. And the GM just kind of took the best offer he could get at the time, with the team that he was dealing with.
It's just so crazy because, like you said, man, this guy's under he's got 8 years left on his deal, man. Like, so obviously, before they got Bregman, they wanted him around forever. Basically, it's just crazy how something can change that quickly. The other interesting note about Devers is he goes to San Francisco, and at least a report that I read, he's super happy. He wants to be there, and he'll play wherever they want him to play. So
Yeah,
maybe like
it's
he's just
bizarre.
like, okay, he just didn't. He felt so slighted by Boston that he just became a malcontent. But
I think it's more of a situation. He was pissed that they didn't talk to him beforehand. I think
so
that more than anything, because a lot of people were saying, well, you're getting paid, 300 million for the next 8 years. Can't you just play where they want you to play? But in his eyes, he is supposed to be the leader of the team. He's the highest paid. He's the best player. They should have talked to him beforehand and said, are you okay with this? And maybe he would have been if they would have said, hey, we're going to get Bregman. Would you be willing to play DH? Would you be willing to take first base reps? Would you be willing, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if they put him in the counter outfield, but definitely first base and DH. Like, talk to him beforehand. And it doesn't appear like they did that, or at least made, enough of an attempt to communicate with him beforehand.
yeah, it's interesting for sure. But we can move on because
Well,
did
one thing I
you,
do want to bring
oh yeah,
up,
go ahead.
Tom, is this move. You trade your best player, your best hitter. It feels like a move like you can't be all in it to win it right now. Like, I would think they would, if they fall off even a little bit from this point on, that I would think they would be sellers. And if they are, that opens something that opens up things with Bregman again. Would they be willing to move Bregman? Would they be willing to move their closer Chapman, who's had an incredible year even in his, as he's getting older? And those two pieces would obviously be perfect for the Tigers if the opportunity arises.
Could you imagine? Oh man, did you bring that up? Could you imagine if we ended up getting Bregman anyway? But now you're not just signing him,
Yeah, give up
now you're getting the
prospects.
contract, and you're gonna have to give up, I mean, who knows? Like, okay, so in theory, just in your own, like, off the top of your head, if things did happen and they did decide to sell, or trade Bregman, which seems insane, given the situation, but what do you think it would take from Boston? Probably not much if it didn't take much for Devers, but if they did, what would you envision having to trade away if that Bregman situation did happen?
Man, I don't even I don't even know, to be honest with you at this point. I don't know how much a Bregman would cost because of his contract so unique
The opt
with the
out
opt
after
out
one
after the
year is
first year.
huge.
So it is potentially a rental, but if he gets hurt, then it becomes a long term because it's an opt out on his end. So it's similar to the deals that the Tigers made with Baez and Eduardo Rodriguez, which at the time bit them in the ass on both ends because Eduardo Rodriguez had 2 great years and then left and then screwed him at the trade deadline saying he would accept a trade to the Dodgers. And then when the time came and the trade was done, he declined it. So
Yeah.
the Tigers end up getting nothing for Rodriguez and he leaves after 2 years. And the vice versa with Baez, he was terrible the first 2 years of the contract. So he opted in, which locked in the next 4 years of that contract. So I think the Tigers just don't want to That's why they didn't sign Bregman. He ended up going to Boston because the Tigers don't want to deal with these opt-in situations because it's
Yeah.
really dicey. You can get screwed either way. If he has a great year and then opts out, you only had him for the 1 year. If he gets hurt, then you're stuck with him. So I really don't know. I really don't know what it would take. I don't think it would take the top prospects that they have, like a Max Clark or McGonagall, but probably just a tier below that. Um, Still probably some back end of their top 10 prospects. And you'd probably have to get a pretty good package together to get him. Because if he's available, a lot of other teams are going to be going for him too. So
Yeah. Now, it's definitely something to monitor in Boston because they got some good players. They're still a good team, but I don't know, man. A locker room chemistry can like really destroy, a season. And so who knows?
well, it's
Some
just fascinating because
more.
you remember when the Tigers got Prince Fielder
Yeah.
and Cabrera was the first baseman. And I have to assume that they had some conversations with Cabrera because he ended up agreeing to move to third base, which he had been the first baseman for a while. He moved to third base so Prince Fielder can come in and be the first baseman. But I think a lot of those times the players are just like, heck yeah, I'll move. Like we're getting this all-star player to help our team. Like, let's go, you know. But that wasn't the case with Devers. And I think that it just caught Boston by surprise. But again, you got to communicate with your face of the franchise. You're making a big move like that and ask them to move a position.
And Andy, that's where I want to transition to is the guy who's quickly becoming the face of the Tigers franchise and is about to be in a contract situation here. Is Tarik Skubal. And man, these pitchers, especially these these flamethrowers. Well, I mean, Skubal, he's got just an array of pitches, but he's considered a power arm. Um, who's already had some injury situations in the past, even going back to college. He's looking for a deal. And some of these pitchers out there, these big time pitchers, they're getting paid lengthy, long-term contracts. Um, just like, I mean, come on, like 10 years, 40 million. Like, I've heard that rumor out there. What do you do with a guy like Scoob? Well, not a guy like, what do you do with Scooble right now if you're Scott Harris? Because this guy, he looks like he could be a Cy Young winner, if not Cy Young contender, for years to come. Or he could flame out next year, like, because with pitchers, it's a crapshoot. But we're seeing the talent that he has and how dominant he can be. And he's still young. So if you were Scott Harris, what are you doing with Tarik Skubal right now?
I think if you're Scott Harris, you have to plan and approach things as if he's not coming back after next year. Like you build your team over this coming trade deadline, next year's free agent period, and next year's deadline is you have two opportunities here to win a World Series with the best pitcher in the game. And you build your team around it and you go all in these next 2 seasons to try to win it all. Because I don't think he's coming back. And they're not going to sign an extension because they're going to go to free agency. They've made that pretty clear. Like they're going to take him to free agency and they're going to try to sign the biggest contract in the history of baseball for a pitcher. And he's probably going to get it. It's going to be over 400 million. And I don't think that even whether the Tigers are willing to go to that or not, we're not going to know until he hits free agency because they are going to free agency. It's just what they're going to do because you have
He,
an opportunity to get the biggest contract of all time. You're going to go do
he
it.
just got Boris guy, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Now, how risky is that for them? I mean, I know he's gambling on himself, but like I said, man, he tweaks that arm a few too many times, or God forbid, he's got to get the Tommy John again because he had the Tommy John right
When he was in the minors,
in
yeah.
college, right? Either minors or college. Yeah. Something like that happens in the next year or two. That's going to be brutal for his free
It's
agency.
a huge risk, but we saw this. Max Scherzer did it, going into the 2014 season. And he bet on himself for that entire season, and he was incredible. And he signed a huge contract with the Nationals, and it worked for him. We've seen it in the past, and man, that hurt the Tigers, obviously.
Yeah.
Like they lost Scherzer, they missed the playoffs every year after that until last season. Like it really hurt their franchise. So again, man, if I'm Harris, I have to treat it as such. Like, yeah, they'll try to resign him once he hits free agency. They will. But you're going to be competing with the Yankees, the Mets, and the Dodgers, and you're going to have to pay him more than any pitcher's ever gotten in the history of baseball to keep him. And the Tigers will have to make that decision if they're going to keep him or not. And who knows? Maybe he still will go elsewhere. You don't know. You don't
Yeah.
know that for sure. You would like to think if they give him the best offer that he would stay. But you also got a question, should they even do that? Should they keep him long term and give him that amount of money? Like we might see from last year, this season, and next season, the best he'll ever be. And I always think when you give a player a long-term contract, or really any contract, you got to pay him for what you think he's going to be throughout the length of that contract. Is he gonna realize that potential of what you're paying for? Or are you paying for what he's done in the past?
Yeah.
Obviously they did it with Cabrera, and
Yeah, I was
it
gonna say we saw that with
ruined. I
Miggy, and
mean, it
that
was terrible. They paid him for what he had done instead of what they think he's going to do throughout the length of that contract. And the last 4 or 5 years of that deal, it was bad. Like it
yeah.
was
You
bad.
got the 1 year, basically you're just like parading him out there to get the 3,000 hits and the 500 home runs, and that was a lot of fun. But for the most part, those last few years were it was bad, man. Like he could hardly run. He was barely hit. He wasn't hitting home runs. Like, and it was just rough. And there wasn't even really anywhere to play him either. Because like even trying to put him at DH, he really wasn't hitting. So like it was just like you just had to kind of like drag him along for 30 million a year, which again, it's not like in football, or basketball where there's a salary cap, so it's not really about that part, but it's just I guess from a Tigers from a business standpoint, when you're paying somebody that kind of money and like you said, you're paying for what they did in the past, and then you're still operating with a balance, like a budget, even though there's no cap, the owners, and I think we've seen Chris Ilitch as he's not his dad, he's not going out there like willy-nilly just throwing money out there. So I wonder if the Tigers win the World Series, do you automatically start thinking about trading Skubal at that point? And because you're probably not going to sign him to that 10-year, 400 million. So like if they win this year, why not try to get a blockbuster deal and get a whole bunch of return for a guy that there's a good chance you're not even going to re-sign? And that's probably the only thing it would take, right? Or like even if because it's hard to say because this team looks like it's built to be winners for years to come. Um, so if they get close but don't win it, or they win it all, is there a reason to trade him next year, regardless?
I think you try to win it again. Right? Well, you win a World Series, and that's obviously putting the cart way before the horse. So we're
Yeah,
playing a hypothetical game. But let's say they do win it with Skubal as the ace. Why wouldn't you try to win it again next year with the best pitcher in all baseball? Like I get you trade him and you try to get a bunch of prospects to try to, reload it again so that you're a winner for a long time. But I would say that if they had a really bad farm system, like if their farm system was in like the low 20s or something, and they didn't have a lot of prospects on their way up, I would say, yeah, maybe you do that so that you can sustain things for a long time. But they have the best farm system in all of baseball. They have a
yeah,
lot of great prospects that are coming up. So even if Skubal does leave, they're going to have guys ready to go. Their pitching staff might take a big hit, but they have a lot of hitters that are coming up through the minors that might equal things out over the long term. And obviously, they're not, you know, if Skubal does leave, it's not like they're just not going to spend any money in free agency. They'll go out and get somebody. They'll probably go out and get a, you know, high quality starter, not in the 400 million range, but still a pretty good starter to replace or try to somewhat replace what Skubal has done. But I think you enjoy this rest of this season and next season, and you do everything you can to win and build a team around him to go win it, and with the expectation that he's going to leave.
Yeah. Well, that I was reading my guy Valente brought up an interesting point. I don't know if you heard this one, but he said he was talking about going after Chris Sale. I thought that was pretty interesting. Chris obviously great pitcher, would cost a lot. Now that's a guy you're probably talking about, your top prospect or two, maybe even three, and then maybe a couple guys on the roster already. Like it'd be a pretty huge package. But is there would he be an option in your mind, or is there another guy that um pitching wise to like go with our rotation right now that could be like that blockbuster move that says, okay, we're going for this right now. We're gonna kind of mortgage some of the future to get our team in the best possible position to win it all right now because we've got that opportunity.
Well, you know, like I said, with expecting Skubal to be gone after, you know, the year and a half, and I said, you know, you got the number one farm system. How much are you willing to give up of all that to go out and get a top guy, I guess? But I don't know if Chris Sale's the guy, and I don't know how much the Braves are going to be moving people. You know, we'll see in the next month where they're at. I still think the Braves are just too talented to not get hot here and get them running, get back into things. But we'll see. I don't know if Chris Sale's the guy, but a guy I do like out of the team that I'm kind of eyeing because there's quite a few guys I would like off that team are the St. Louis Cardinals. They're kind of hanging around the fringe of the last wild card in the NL, but they're definitely way back in the division. The Cubs are kind of running away with that thing, or at least running away from the Cardinals in the NL Central. So the Cardinals with Sonny Gray, starting pitcher, Tigers fans remember when he was with the Twins for a bit. He's a quality starter who's pitched in a lot of big games in the past. He's somebody I would really like. And as far as the third, they also have a third baseman with that it was kind of rumored before the season that the Tigers might get involved is Nolan Arenado. He's definitely getting up there in age. I think it's a 33, 34. But he's still got some time left on him. But
So he had the no trade clause, right? And the Tigers were not on that list. I wonder if that changes
yeah,
next year
I think
contention.
that would change if he has the potential to go win a World Series. But yeah, that would complicate some things for sure. They would have to communicate with him and see if he'd agree to it. Um, but I have a feeling if you have an opportunity to go to the team that has the best record in baseball, he probably agreed to it, I would think. As a competitor, I would think he would want to do that. Um, and then their closer, Housley, is one of the better closers in all of baseball. So those are three things that they need that the Cardinals have, and they're looking to get younger as well. They were kind of looking to get younger before this year started. So if things kind of fall off a bit and they're not in it, they're definitely a team that I would keep an eye on. They kind of have, starting pitcher and Gray, third baseman Arenado, and a closer in Housley that they would be great on this team for sure.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. Especially, yeah, Arenado. He's like I said, he's getting up there, but he's still a great player. Well, good maybe, but he definitely was great. Yeah, like I said, he's getting older, but that could be a potential thing to
And
watch for
they're
though.
definitely going to add to the team. It's just a question of who's going to be available. Are there going to be big names available? Um, and if there are, they should go after them. But I feel like more likely it's going to be a guy like an Arenado who's towards the back end of his career who can still give them some quality at bats and give them good defense at third base. Is he Alex Bregman? No, but he's still a quality player that would be a benefit to this roster. Um, and then a starting pitcher like a Sonny Gray or maybe even a tier below him are guys they can get. But they're going to be adding. Like they're going to be adding it, and maybe sooner rather than later with injuries that have been popping up. And we talked about it last week. We didn't even mention about Jackson Joe potentially, and that we talked right, it was I think the next day that he went on the IL
Yeah.
with Tommy John. So he gets knocked out. He's going to be gone for obviously the rest of this season. He might be out all next season. Um, so that's a brutal hit to their starting rotation, not only this year but for next year as well. So yeah, the Tigers are gonna have to be looking for somebody. They're gonna need
They
at
are.
least some depth in that rotation.
It's interesting how they can still compete on the bullpen days, and they tend to do that. But I don't think that's sustainable if I, in a especially deep into a I mean, if they maintain a 10 game lead, that's one thing, but I have to imagine that Cleveland and or Minnesota will be closing that gap, and to have a bullpen day every fifth game, that's going to hurt. It's going to hurt. It hurts just to have to do that against the competition, but then it bleeds your bullpen for the next day or two. You know,
They were able to do it in the run last year, starting in August and going through the regular season, but that was just that was just magic. I mean,
yeah,
everybody was just playing out of their minds. I mean, every pitcher they brought in just pitched great. And when you do those bullpen days, you need everybody that you have in line to pitch well. Because if one guy gets blown up, it screws up the whole thing.
yeah,
Like if one guy can't come in and get, multiple outs, then it screws up your whole schedule of how you're going to bring these guys in. And the whole point of it is you're trying to match up, inning by inning and hitter by hitter, try to match up your best relievers against their hitters, going righty lefty and trying to match up as best you can. And if everything doesn't go right, it screws the whole schedule up. So the fact that what they did last year was just pure magic. You can't do exactly what they did last year, and you're starting to see that this year. Their bullpen just hasn't been as deep and hasn't been quite as effective as it was. Canely and Vest have been fantastic, but outside of them, it's been really hit and miss. And they've been shuffling guys in and out, and they cut Brebbia the other day, DFA'd him. It was a signing that was questionable in the offseason because he wasn't very good last year either. The hope was, hey, maybe Feder and Hinch see something in this guy that they can fix and get him going again, but obviously didn't work out, and he's off the roster now. So, and you're starting to see a little bit of those, guys are coming and going. So just not performing as well as they were. Bo Brisky's back in Toledo. He's really struggled this year. He was huge for them in the run last year. So again, the bullpen just has not been as strong as it was last season, and they're gonna need to get somebody at some point.
who did they? I was just gonna look up. They just made a move.
They picked up Hernandez from the
Yeah,
Phillies.
Carlos Hernandez from the Phillies. Um, yeah, I mean nothing too exciting. Like
I mean, he can throw. He
right-handed
can
leader,
throw in the high
498
90s. Yeah,
career
he can throw
ERA.
in the high
So
90s. I mean,
yeah,
he's got
that's one
something
thing.
there, but he's got control issues, and he's obviously the Phillies. They're in contention, obviously. So they're not just gonna give guys away, especially
Yeah,
quality bullpen arms. So he's another guy. Like he's kind of just one of those that's gonna get shuffled in and out. Maybe they find lightning in a bottle with him. Maybe they're able to fix something and get him to be more consistent. Because if you can throw a fastball in the high 90s, that obviously gives you something to start with. Like he's not throwing in the low 90s or has arm issues or anything. Like there's something to work with there, but
yeah,
obviously he's had his issues, which is why he was available.
yeah. So yeah, maybe like I said, um, the guy's he's a flamethrower, so maybe it works out for us. That's the thing with baseball, man. Like guys, like some guys they just need a change of scenery for some reason, and
Or a
then
change in coaching staff. Maybe
yeah,
coaches just see something that maybe the other coaches didn't see for whatever reason. And they can fix it. That's the thing about pitching, hitting too, really. It could just be a little minor thing in your mechanics that needs to be tweaked, and all of a sudden, everything comes back to what it was, and you're rolling again. So we'll see. Hopefully that's what turns out. Hopefully Federer gets in and finds something and tweaks it, and we they get a quality reliever out of it. I'm not as hopeful though. I'm
Yeah.
guessing he's probably going to be one of those guys that just gets shuffled in and out. We see him for a month or two and then he's gone again.
Yeah, we'll see. So when's the trade deadline? It's the end of July, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So we got a little time yet to see how things
Yeah,
develop.
so there's teams that are gonna get hot and who you thought were gonna be sellers who end up buyers and vice versa. Teams that you thought would have been buyers end up collapsing and they end up being sellers. So I see we talked about the rumors that Bo Bichette and the Blue Jays. It's like, well, the Blue Jays got hot. They're in it, like they're
Yeah.
contending, and they just paid Vlad Guerrero a big time, long term, expensive contract. Like they're trying to win. Like, and they right now they have the last playoff spot. So right now, if the trade deadline was now, they're not going to sell Bichette. Like that's not even something that's going to happen. So I like it's interesting to look at like what kind of players the guys are going to get. I mean, we put names to it, but I more just look at like the type of players and the positions that the Tigers would be looking for more than putting, you know, exact names on. Like, you talked about Chris Sale. Well, what if the Braves get really hot? Here,
Yeah.
it's not even going to be a conversation. So I think it's more important to just kind of look at what type of guys the Tigers need and and the positions that they need and see what where they go from
One
there.
guy that's coming back pretty soon here, Matt Vierling. What kind of impact do you think? Because he's kind of like he's one of those guys that can go like almost any position. What kind of impact do you think he will have? Because he's a guy that can really spark the team, I think. Is it what kind of impact will he have?
Well, the question is, can he stay healthy? Like he came back for 2 games and then was right back on the shelf again. So, can he get that shoulder to be consistent, throughout the rest of this year? It's that is the bit number one thing. But he would be a huge impact to this team. He was big for this team last year. He brings in veteran leadership. He always gives you a quality at bat, and he can play kind of all over the place. He's also a right-handed hitter, which this team is, heavy on left-handed hitters, especially in the outfield. So, like you got Carpenter, you got Green, you got Meadows. Those are all left-handed hitters. And then Wenzel Perez has come up. He's been fantastic since he came back up. He hit a home run and a triple last night, but he's one of those few that can hit right-handed. He's a switch hitter, can hit both
Yeah,
lefty and righty. But outside of that, they don't really have a consistent right-handed hitter. They brought up Jahmai Jones after they sent Andy Ibanez down, and he's had a few highlights since he's been up, but he's not somebody that I would have a lot of faith in throughout the course of the season, especially when the playoff time come around. You want somebody that's kind of been there and done that, and you have a lot of faith in Verling as that guy. So he would be perfect, to come back in. And yes, he can play third base. So he played quite a lot of third base last year. So a
yeah,
right-handed third baseman is something they obviously need. But the question is, with that shoulder, can he play third? Is he going to be able to make those throws from third to first consistently throughout the rest of the season? So yeah, what do you think he can provide? He provides a lot. Right-handed hitter, veteran leadership, but is he going to be able to hang around with that shoulder?
yeah. All right, man. We can wrap up this Tiger talk right now. It's fascinating to just it's just exciting, man. It's just fun. Like early on, they're so good. It just leads to like just all these expectations and going down to like to the ballpark. It's exciting to go down. It's not like you can just sit anywhere you want anymore. People are there, man. They're going, and like every game feels like a big game right now. And so it's a lot of fun, and it's gonna be a lot of fun, especially going down this stretch right here up until the trade deadline to see kind of what moves get made and so some exciting things to come. But all right, so I want to switch it up. Let's talk some college football. So like I said in the intro, people have been wanting, like going back to like the 90s, early 2000s, people were really wanting like a playoff system. It was always talked about, but something that people never really thought would happen in college football because of the way college football was designed. The regular season is so important. Every game in the regular season is so important. And then your rivalries and like that's what college football was based off of. And then going to the Bulls, and then like but then it was on the pollsters to vote for who was the champion, and that always felt just not right. Like especially some of those years, like I mean, especially as a Michigan fan. Go back to 97 when Tom Osborne and got his going away retirement present, you know, they and for so Nebraska, so they were co-champs. And then, going back that way, there was a lot, that happened a decent amount. So then as time went on, you had the BCS and stuff like so you started to get more of it, but then it just kind of grew into this, and now like what we have now is an actual true playoff system. That last year was very underwhelming, man. The games were underwhelming. It just lacked. I mean, there were a few of them, a few thrillers, but a lot of them just weren't great football games. Um, and now this coming season, the format is even a little different, where you don't even have to win your conference to get that first round bye. So there's just a straight 1 through 12 seeding. So theoretically, Michigan and Ohio State can be 1 and 2, which absolutely annihilates the game, right? So you're completely taken away from the regular season. Now, Dan, what are your thoughts on how on what college football has become with this playoff situation?
Well, we saw it last year, and my entire life, it's always been in the Big Ten and in this area, but really nationally, it's been Michigan, Ohio State. When they play each other, everybody stops and watches. It is they call it the game for a reason. Like it's always led up to that, and whether it was both teams had a chance or it was just one team had a chance, the Big Ten conference championship seemed to always be on the line in that game. Like it was if one team didn't have a chance at it, they were trying to ruin their rival's season. They were trying to take away the Big Ten championship from that team and their opportunity to go for a national championship. Now you can lose that game, not make the Big Ten championship. You can finish fourth in the conference and still go on and win the national championship, which is exactly what Ohio State did last year. So the result of them losing 13-10 to Michigan, this crushing loss, you thought Ryan Day was going to get fired. None of it happened. The Michigan fans will remember the game, but other than that, nationally, Ohio State fans, who cares? They won the national title. They're the champs. It doesn't matter what happened in that game. They won the national championship. And for the first time in my life, and probably the first time ever in the history of college football and in that rivalry, the outcome of that game meant literally nothing to the outcome of the entire season. And it didn't really hit me until that happened. Until Ohio State won, when they lifted up the national championship, it hit me. I'm like, college football is never going to be the same now. It's just not. And I don't like it. I don't like it at all. I don't like the fact that I like that there's an opportunity for every team to potentially win a national title. Like you're never going to have a team go undefeated and not win a national title. Like that was ridiculous because it was the only sport that exists where you don't lose a game and you don't win the whole thing.
Yeah.
I'm glad that that's fixed. That part of it is fixed. But the expansion and how far they have gone with this ruins so much of what is special about college football. The importance of the regular season, the importance of rivalry games, the importance of winning your conference, the importance of winning your division. None of it matters anymore. None of it matters. There's a potential that things expand to the point where basically, when we just look at the Big Ten, where 6 teams could potentially be playing for a playoff spot. So they would have 4 automatics, but they're talking about having, instead of having a Big Ten championship game, they use that weekend to have play-in games. So the 3 seed plays the 6, the 4 plays the 5. The winners of those games get the 3 and 4 seed out of the Big Ten. So essentially, you finish with 6 teams making the playoffs, in a way. So you could finish 6th in the Big Ten, 6th, like in the middle of the pack, and you're making the postseason. I mean, that is ruining everything that we've grown up with. It just, the regular season doesn't mean anything anymore, and that sucks. That sucks.
Yeah. So you've talked about this in the past. You got a pretty good idea about how to bring importance back to the Michigan-Ohio State game. Why don't you elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, so if this is where we're headed, and the result of what happened last season can happen more often, and they're only going to expand at this point. They're not going to subtract from the teams that are going to make the playoffs, right? They're not going to say, yeah, let's not make as much money as we are. That's not going to happen. So it's only going to expand, and it's only going to get worse. So how do you keep the importance in what has made Michigan Ohio State special? How do you make that game still the game in college football? Well, my idea is to move it, instead of being the last game of the regular season, you make it the first game of the regular season. So the whole buildup in the offseason is leading up to the first game of the year, which would be Michigan Ohio State. And currently, this might change as years goes on, but they've had this week 0, they call it, where they have a few college games, maybe one kind of marquee game, but not really. But it's just college football, so people watch, right? It's
There's
just
been
a way
some
to kind of get
decent
the
ones. I've
season.
seen some decent ones. Like, gosh, I can't remember. I think didn't Florida State and Miami do it recently?
I don't think it was week 0 though. I think they usually play on like Labor Day. They'll play on that Monday. They'll
Yeah.
kind of play in a special primetime slot. But it's the week 0. I think last year was Boston College and Florida State, and Boston College beat Florida State, and that was kind of a big
Okay.
deal. Because it ended up being a big game because Boston College beat them. It was an
Yeah,
upset.
because I know that week there's only a couple games.
Yeah,
It's not like a
I
whole.
would make week 0 that's Michigan Ohio State. Like they're the primetime spot. They're the biggest game in college football. They own the spotlight, and everything, all the talk leading up to the regular season start is about that game. So it's still special. It would still feel like it means a ton. It means a lot. And you kind of like how NASCAR, right? They start off with their biggest race, or what is, perceived as their biggest race, with the Daytona 500. That starts their season,
Yeah.
right? This would be kind of like the Daytona 500 of college football. You start your season with your most highly anticipated game. And I think that could keep that game as special and keep it as
See,
important.
I like it because now with the Big Ten, they, what is it now? The Big Six to Big 18. I don't know. I can't even keep up, man. What do we got? 16 teams in there now? With the Big Pac 16, I think we can call it now. Um, they they did away with the conferences, right? Like so now, like or like
It did
or
away with the
the
divisions. Yeah, so it's just
division.
a conference. So I think I believe every conference has done this, where you just have the top 2 teams in the conference play each other in the
Well,
conference championship game.
yeah, because theoretically with this, Michigan and Ohio State or could play back-to-back games.
Yeah. This it takes away that too. You move it to
Yeah,
the first game, then they're at least not playing back to back at the end of the regular season. So you don't have them playing the last game of the regular season and then the Big Ten championship game.
could you imagine, man? I can definitely imagine it because both teams should be pretty good this year. They both run the table. Then you play the game at the end of the season, and it's going to be like a preseason game. Why would you even play any of your starters
Well,
that game?
if it's clinched that they're 1-2, which is a potential scenario. Like if they're both undefeated
Yeah,
going into the last game, it would probably be clinched that they're 1-2 in the Big Ten, regardless of the outcome. They would
yeah.
know that they're going to play the following week, regardless of the outcome of the game.
Like you want to talk
Which,
about
I mean, you talk about
meaning
like,
nothing.
yeah, you talk about ruining it. Like our whole lives, we always talk about, oh, how great it would be if they're undefeated at the end, playing each other. And
Yeah,
happened in '06, and it's happened, what, 12 and 13.
yeah,
So like we've seen it, we've gotten to see it, and how special it is when they match up, when they're undefeated and they're 1-2. And I think a couple years they were 2-3. And like it's unbelievable the build up all week and everything, and that they could be undefeated this year going into that game, and it just wouldn't feel, it would still be a big deal, but it just wouldn't be anywhere near what it's been in the past.
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, man. And it's but that's college football. It's turned into so like with all of it, man, with the transfer portal and NIL. So now you got these kids getting, millions of dollars before they even get on campus. And and then you got guys coming and going. So these rivalries aren't even the same anymore because these kids aren't here learning about the rivalry and putting that blood, sweat, and tears from freshman to senior and knowing how important this rivalry is. A lot of it is just, pay me. If I don't get paid, I'm gonna go elsewhere. I better play as a freshman, otherwise I'm out of here. There's no loyalty to the team. Like it's just the whole game has changed, and I don't think for the better. Um, Especially it's just not like it used to be, and it never will be. And like we got to get used to it, but we're gonna have to, like you said, we got to
Yeah.
figure out ways to keep it what it keep some
There,
semblance of the fact that it is college football and not just minor league football. You
there's no
know?
doubt there was problems. There was problems, right? The players needed to be paid. It was
Yeah,
not
yeah.
right that they weren't being paid. The solution is just awful, right? That they can go wherever. They're getting paid by God knows who. Like who knows where they're getting the money from, who's paying them, how much
Yeah.
they're getting. There's no structure to it. So it's just the wild, wild west out there right now because there's no structure.
And now they're saying that the schools are can now pay them directly. Like
But they
that
can
might
pay them
be better
directly, but
than the
they can
boosters
still get
paying
paid
them.
from outside sources too.
Yeah. Oh, they're gonna get both
So
now. Like,
so it just leads to all kinds of, and what does that do to the small schools? Like
yeah.
it used to be like the real small schools struggled because guys were just going to transfer to the bigger schools to play in the bigger games, and they have a better opportunity to get to the league, right? To get to the NFL. But now you're going to look at a team like Boise State that has been successful for 20 years now, right? How are they going to compete now? Like they've been competing at a top 15 level for a long time, just based on having a great program. Well, they're not going to have the money to compete with the Ohio States, the Michigans, the Bamas, Tennessee's, all these schools.
Texas and
Yeah,
Texas A&M, man.
yeah, all of them.
These guys are
They have no
shelling out money
shot.
like crazy, man. And they got, like Oklahoma State, they got like Warren Buffett as a booster, man. Like before they would just buy the stadiums and buy new equipment and stuff. Now they're literally buying players, man. Good thing we got Dave Portnoy on our side, man. And um is it Ross? He owns the Dolphins.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's put on base. So Michigan yeah, Michigan fans, I think we'll be okay in this day and age because I know Harbaugh was pretty much against it, and you're going to see like that Michigan team, um, 2015, the national champion. That's going to be the last true like born and bred like homegrown type team that you're probably ever going to
Yeah, the
see.
2023 team. Now people
Or no, I'm
outside
sorry,
of
yeah, yeah,
Michigan are going to say it was tainted and there was cheating and there was this and that. But to me, I don't, we can have that conversation down the road. If
yeah. I
things,
don't know why I said
if they ever
23.
get violations and any sanctions ever come down, we'll have that conversation of what really happened there. But in my eyes, that was the last like true, like when college football was still great. Like that era ended with that season. You had Michigan, Ohio State both undefeated. Ohio State lost, they were out, right? Michigan goes on, they go to the Rose Bowl and play Alabama in the Rose Bowl in this epic overtime game. It's Nick Saban's last game. Like, and then Michigan goes on and plays Washington, a traditional, postseason Pac-12, it would have been a Pac-10, Big Ten matchup. It would have been in the rules, so this was the national championship game. But just like a traditional postseason, Michigan, Washington, there was so much like nostalgia mixed in with everything that was going on there, and it was an amazing run to watch. But that was it. And now it's over. Like that era is over. And you could say for better or for worse, but what it's feeling like every day that what I see going on, it just feels like it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it's
And
they're
what's it?
ruining
Okay,
they're
so
ruining something that was
yeah,
so special.
yeah. Well, okay, so you're seeing it now. So like with an incoming freshman like Bryce Underwood, who basically flipped from LSU to Michigan, got a huge NIL deal. How much expectation is it now for these freshmen to come in right out of high school, get all this money, and instantly compete? Because back in the day, man, you never heard of a freshman coming in and being a quarterback. You're sitting 1, 2, maybe 3 years before you even get playing time. Now these guys are expected. Oh, hey, we're paying you. You better play and you better win. Like, what kind of pressure is that to put? Now,
The
Underwood
pressure on the
kind of looks like a
coaches.
generational type talent, but not all these guys are. And you don't know what it's going to happen from a kid from high school to college, man. Like, they're still growing mentally, like quite a bit.
Yeah.
Um, and that game is a lot different from high school to college to the big time, D1. It's a very dramatic difference. So what kind of expectations are going to be put on kids like Underwood?
Yeah, now what I was gonna say, it also puts pressure on the coaches. Like if let's say the Michigan we I talked to this with our friend Brian Barnes, who co-hosts the Inside the Coach's Office with you,
Yeah.
and one of my close friends. We were talking about it. Like, what is this pressure puts on the coaches? Like, if Michigan's quarterback coach comes to Sherrone Moore and says, "Hey, man, he's not ready. Like, he's not ready to go yet. Like, I don't think he should start." Well, what is that pressure that put on Sherrone Moore? Be like, yeah, but he's making 10 million. So
Yeah.
everybody on the outside and the people that are paying him that's his money want to see him and they want to see him play. They don't want to see a mediocre backup quarterback start the season. And they definitely don't want to see him in week 2 at Oklahoma. They want to see Underwood. They want to see the number 1 recruit. So, and this might not be, maybe Underwood probably will be the top guy and he'll probably start, but what if he's not? And I'm sure there's going to be situations across the country where these are situations that are happening where kids are making millions of dollars and they're not ready to start. But the coaches are put on an immense pressure from outside sources to play these kids because they're making millions of dollars to
So then
play.
and where's the cutoff point? Let's say he does play against, he starts and looks atrocious, against New Mexico. And then you do got to play against Oklahoma. At what point do you know, pull the reins in and say, okay, like we showed you, but and now and at what point with this NIL does it become um like incentive laden, where it's like, okay, well, you get 1 million if you're the starter all season, you get 2 million if you win X amount of games, 3 million if you win a champion, like so forth and so forth. And then that makes it even crazier because
Oh yeah,
now and then at what point are these kids going to have their own agents? Like they probably
they're
already
gonna have
should.
to.
They
They're gonna
like
have to because what you brought up, like, okay, incentive laden. I don't think these deals are incentive laden. I think they're just kind of straight up like, hey, we're paying you this amount of money to come here. Well, what if he doesn't pan out? You get the week year 2, year 3, this kid's not good. He's not playing, but he's making millions of dollars. The people
yeah.
that are paying him, are they still gonna want to pay him? And we've seen some of those situations where kids
Yeah.
are promised
Well,
a certain amount of money, and then
Qu-
when it's time to get that money, it's not there.
yeah. Or Quinn Ewers came into Ohio State, took $1 million from him, I don't even think he played it down, and then just took off to Texas. He's out of here. I mean, could you imagine paying, like, if you're a booster, you pay $1 million to a kid who doesn't play and he's gone next year? I'd be suing,
Yeah.
I'd take that kid to court.
And that's where we're headed. Like we're in this weird time right now where it's like I've said, it's the wild, wild west right now. There's no rules, there's no boundaries, there's no structure. At some point, there's going to have to be some structure, and there's going to be, and
How could that even
it's
have been though? Like the NCAA should be, I mean, they already are pretty much a joke, but they should be embarrassed at how this whole situation has come about because they've known for years this was gonna happen. The writing was
well,
on
they
the wall.
didn't necessarily. The Supreme Court laid the
Well,
law down and said like you have to pay him. It's an antitrust, and they have to pay him. And I don't think the NCAA was expecting that. But I always go back to this: what is the NCAA? Who
yeah,
are they? Who runs it? Like, it's there's no like it's not like the U.S. government. It's just an entity that doesn't really have a whole lot of leg to stand on. There's no structure. There's no
yeah.
rules. There's no boundaries. That's
And
why
the
these
fact that
coaches are leaving.
they
That's why
don't
Nick
even,
Saban. You think Nick Saban would have left if there was any type of structure and like things were the way it used to be? He left probably
yeah.
years earlier than he would have because he's seen the writing on the wall and where the system is headed. It's terrible.
And they don't even own, I don't know if own the right is the right word, but they basically have no control over their own football playoff system, which is the biggest thing
Yeah.
in college sports. I like clearly. And they don't even have the authority to rule over that at all. It's the TV rights, the like it's it's
I think
been
where we're headed, and it might be a couple years from now, maybe five, might be 10 years down the road. I think it's coming sooner rather than later, though. It's just going to be the Big Ten and the SEC. They're going to expand. They're going to pick up more schools, at least in college football, and they're just gonna set up their own system. They're going to break away from the NCAA, have nothing to do with it, and they're going to set up their own college football system, and it's just going to be like the NFL, AFC and NFC, Big Ten, SEC.
and
And
that man,
and
I
but at
don't
least in like at least there'll be structure, there'll be contracts, there'll be agents, and these kids are just going to be hired employees. Basically, the college football is just going to be a marketing tool for these universities, and they're paying for marketing. These players are basically out there as paid advertisements for the
yeah.
university, and that's what it's going to be. And that's because that's basically what it's always been, anyways. But at least this is going to at least provide some structure to it, and you're not going to have kids just making God knows how much amount of money when they haven't done anything. There'll be contracts, there'll be stipulations, the NFL, basically the NFL at the college level. Because if this is what it's going to be, we're never going to go back to the way it used to be. So we're in this weird limbo time right now where it's just terrible. There's no structure. So at least I believe this is where we're going to be headed. That's where we need to be because there needs to be structure, there needs to be rules. There needs to be somebody in place as commissioner who oversees everything and dictates everything and everything goes through him because right now there's no leader. There's no leadership and it's just an absolute mess right now.
What do you what do you think? It goes to like 20 teams on each side,
I
and
would
then
say so.
and then
Yeah.
ev- and then they just break off and they just have their own thing, and then the NCAA still controls everybody that's left out, which is a lot of team. What is there like in Division One alone?
It's
What is
like
it like 150
126 or
teams or
something
something
like
like
that.
that? Maybe
I think only 126. There might have been an added
126.
few teams lately. I mean, it's
Yeah.
somewhere in that range for the
So you're
college
still
football
going to have
side.
the other conferences and that, but that's going to be football that's hard to watch because all your talent is obviously going to these 40 teams.
Yeah, that's why they should, and it's going to do that anyways.
Yeah.
So they might as well, like I talked about Boise State, like I don't see how they can compete at the level they've been competing for the last 20 years. I don't see how they can going
Yeah.
forward. Like, I don't see how. So like they'd probably be better off playing on a lower tier division. It's still going to have some, it will still be good football. Like there's still a lot of good football players across the country. Like you're still going to be able to put some good teams together, but just not at the level of, the marquee schools.
Yeah. That's wild, man. But all right, man. The whole thought of it is kind of depressing, man, really.
It is.
But
They've ruined something that is my absolute favorite thing in the world, man. College
yeah,
football has always been my favorite. And Michigan Ohio State has been my favorite game across all of sports. It is my favorite game of the year.
yeah.
And they've ruined it. They've absolutely ruined it.
What are you gonna do? But all right, man. We can move on to our third and final topic of the day. Um, it's the Detroit Pistons, man. Detroit basketball. What a run, man. Like a historic season in the fact that from winning 14 games last season to pushing the Knicks to the brink in what was a thrilling second round playoff series or first round playoff series. Um, yeah, they did not go on to the second round, but they almost did, right? And it was a fun season to watch because this young team, decided that they just didn't want to suck, you know. Then JB Bickerstaff comes on and just does a heck of a job, just molding this team into believing that they can win and creating this type of basketball that just fits the city, you know, like the bad boys of the 80s and then the going to work Pistons of the early 2000s. And then you just had that long stretch of just not good basketball. Every here and there, they got a little bit excited. Like there was the one year with Blake Griffin, who, man, just I still respect him for what he did when he got traded here. But man, it was just nothing to be super excited about. And so for the first time in a long time, we've seen a Pistons team that was you could get on that bandwagon, man. Like and the NBA started to like nationally started to figure it out. Like this team is fun to watch. They play with high energy. They play defense. They share the ball. They have a leader in Cunningham who is on the verge of becoming an all NBA player. You know, not just an all-star, but this guy's top tier. And the league took notice this year. Um, with that said, these future plans, this summer is going to be very, very interesting. Um, I know I'm not like, look, you're not going to get Giannis. I don't think, I mean, there's rumors about Durant, but I think every team in the league pretty much right now that, um, like wants like has rumors about Durant because the NBA, man, this one thing, man, about the NBA is that rumor mill is wild and ridiculous. Man, you hear man, I've heard you I heard rumors about Cade Cunningham getting traded. And like come on, man. Like some of this stuff is just absolutely ridiculous. And you know how the social media works, man. People just throw out anything just to get clicks and views, you know, like man, like
The hypothetical trade is one of my biggest pet peeves. Like just somebody just makes up a trade, throws it, would you do it?
yeah.
Like it's just so lazy and ridiculous. And it's like I'm okay with rumors, like trades that have actual factual rumors to them, like insiders saying, like, hey, there's a little bit of smoke to this fire here. Like there's some talks between these teams. Okay, then at that point, yeah, run with it. You know, let's start talking about situations and scenarios, like who would you move to get the guy? But when
Yeah.
teams just like, oh, I'm just gonna throw this out there. Would you do it? Like
Yeah.
it just drives me nuts, man.
Some of them are like, oh, we trade Cade Cunningham for this bench player and a second round pick, you know? And then if you're a fan of the other team, you're like, yeah, I'd do that. That sounds
Yeah,
great.
it goes back to the line because I got so frustrated during the Lions season when they're, why don't they just go trade for Max Crosby? Because the Raiders have said they don't want to trade him. Like that's why. Like, it takes two to tango. Like yeah,
Yeah.
he would be great, but just because your team wants him or you would want him doesn't mean the other team wants to give him up. So like I only
Yeah.
like talk about trades or scenarios where
Yeah.
it's actually feasible on both ends. It makes sense on both ends, and both ends have kind of shown that this potentially could happen.
Yeah. So there is some heat to some of these guys. Like there is some heat to Giannis going, but it's going to take, half your franchise.
Yeah.
The same thing with Durant. He's a little long in the tooth, but he's still KD, man. He can still score. Um, what would be your interest in making a blockbuster move at this point in this Piston trajectory where they went from, like I said, 14 wins to a playoff team that looks pretty good. And this future is bright, man. This roster is young and exciting. Is it time right now to trade some of those young pieces and go get a big name, or is it time to like stand pat and just see what we got with Ivy coming back and the NBA draft, if you're not in that top five or even in the top three some years, you're not you're not getting you're not always going to get like a guy that's going to have an impact soon. But it does seem like Trajan Langdon, the GM, he can evaluate young talent, and I got a lot of confidence in what he's doing. But in your mind, do you want, or would you even want to see that? Would you want to see like an aging superstar, like a Kevin Durant, or you know, maybe like a Zion Williamson? He's still kind of young, but when he's healthy, he's great. So it's going to be a lot of trade capital for a guy like that. But do you want to see like a big splash, or do you just want to see him say, "Hey, man, let's pump the brakes here and build with what we got," especially with Jaden Ivey, who was looking really good before before he got that horrific leg injury, but it seems like he should be pretty much on time to come back next season. Um, do you want to just like stay the course here, or do you think they should build off the excitement of last season with a big splash?
I mean, they're definitely going to add. I just think you want to add more pieces that just fit to this puzzle. I think they're too young, and we haven't seen what Jaden Ivey is capable of doing with Cunningham together. It was a short stint that they were together, and they really seemed to really start clicking for a couple weeks, and then the injury happened.
Yeah.
It would have been really interesting to see what not only Jaden Ivey in that lineup, but also Isaiah Stewart in that lineup against the Knicks, how that series goes with those two players in it. So I know a lot of people want him to make a big splash and see a big move. Like the only one would for me would be Giannis. I mean, I'd give up dang near everything other than Cunningham to get him. But outside of him, I don't think there's anything. I know Durant's out there. I don't know. I don't want that. I just it would have to be
Especially with
somebody
what
that
the
would be
Suns
a
want for it. The Suns want you to believe that you're trading like 2005, you're getting
yeah.
2005 Kevin Durant. And they want
Yeah,
that
it's
kind
just
of haul,
yeah.
It's like let's be realistic here.
I mean, if they're
Not
going
a
to
lot
give
of
up
these
a big haul
moves.
to somebody in the Suns to get somebody from the Suns, it's got to be Booker. I
Yeah.
don't want Durant. You know, like I would much if it's like, hey, you can get Durant, but you got to give up a lot of young pieces. I'd rather just keep the young pieces and see what happens. Um, I think we talked about the Tigers where like they are a young team and they have a lot of prospects coming up as well, but they're in this weird situation where they have the best player in baseball who's probably going to leave after a year and a half. They got Cunningham's here, like he's here for a long time,
Yeah, yeah.
so they're not in that type of situation that the Tigers are in. So I'd like to see this young core just kind of grow at least for another season, um, and see where they're at. And if they get to a point like, hey, maybe they make it to the second round next year or even the finals and then lose, like maybe at that point after next season, it's that point where you reevaluate, okay, we need to make that big move to take us over the hump. And it could be a situation where maybe it's a player, but and as much as I like Bickerstaff and people might not like to hear this, um, they could get to a point where there's a year or two from now where they need to make that move at a coach and get the coach that takes you over the next level. As much as I like Bickerstaff and what he's done, he feels very much like a regular season coach that's going to get the most out of you during the regular season. But once you get to the playoffs, he's
Yeah.
going to get out coached.
Like a
Yeah,
developmental guy
yeah,
rather than we're gonna go win it.
yeah. So
And
we'll
you
see because that
wonder,
could be a situation too down the road. Just something to think about. But
but you
I would
got
rather, but long story short, if I had to pick one thing or the other, I would rather see this young team grow and see what they got because I really want to see what Jaden Ivey can do with Cunningham together.
It's interesting you talk about the NBA coaches though, because like look at the situation in Denver. They win the championship last year, and then they fire their coach mid-season this year. Like So I wonder how much impact coaches really even have in the NBA, man, because the NBA is so much about your superstars and then having pieces around them, because now you look at like Golden State, Steve Kerr, great coach, but how hard is it to say, oh, all right, Steph, be the best shooter, Draymond, bully guys and rebound, and then, hey, Klay Thompson, keep making those threes. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's, I mean, I don't want to sell it too short, but the NBA is a lot like that, man, where you got to just get the right stars in the right fit and then get the pieces around them and then stay healthy. And that is oftentimes the recipe to a championship. And
Well, I just bring up Biggerstaff because, Cleveland got rid of him
yeah,
because they thought he'd gotten to a certain level and then couldn't get him over the hump. All right. So I just wonder if the Pistons are kind of feel like maybe Cleveland from a few years ago where they're
I
kind of on the
think they get,
rise and then
yeah.
maybe they get to a certain point and they feel like they need a switch to take them over the hump.
But again, like with that same coin, like Cleveland, they didn't do anything impressive this year. They were a great regular season team and then flamed out in the playoffs. So you can't put that all on
Oh,
Bickerstaff
that's,
from the year
you're right.
before, you know.
You're
But I don't know, man. For me, I always do get excited about big names. Like, but then you worry about getting guys at the tail end of their career and giving up too much, especially with the young team that's building and has a lot of these guys under rookie contracts and just seeing how they could like Ron Holland, he came on, the kid's 19, 20, Sir Thompson, um, even Cade himself is what 24 years old, that like all these guys, we got this young core of Duran, how much is he gonna grow, like not physically, but like mentally and just his game is gonna grow. And he's, I don't even think he can drink a beer legally yet. Although who's
saw
going
the
to
step
ID
up
him,
that he made just last season from the season before, how much
Yeah.
bigger he got, how much just his passing, how much his passing developed. Like, just think another off season, of what he can do. And all these guys, like you said, they're so young. Like they have not come close to reaching their full potential yet. They're not even close to hitting their prime yet. Like Kate Cunningham's probably just entering his prime. Like, so like they still have a lot of room to grow, and there's something to be said about, playing together, and especially the style that they play is inducive to being together for a long time and growing together and growing through going through the, tough losses together and,
Yeah.
all that. Like, I think there is a lot to said to just keeping this core group together and letting them grow together.
See, I like that. And I think this is a good time right now to trade your like if we're looking for pieces, um, just guys that can fit around Cade. Like maybe more 3-point shooting, maybe like another big man. But this is where you could trade your draft capital right now, for, like this pick that you have and maybe a few more that are down the road. Because in the NBA, you see like draft picks get traded like that are 6, 7 years down the road, which is kind of crazy to me, but you see it, and I think this is a good time with how young our roster is, and how a lot of these guys, man, because we've been so bad for so long. A lot of our picks from the past few years are top five, top seven, guys. Um, with Cade obviously being number one, but I know what Ivy I think was a fifth pick. Um, Sir Thompson, he was he was a low pick. So you're getting these guys that are gonna, especially as they evolve their games, these contracts are gonna come up and they're gonna have to get paid. So just continuing to bring on these younger guys, I say like trade some picks now, get some pieces around them, really build for the next 2, 3 years, as opposed to worrying about the next 7, 8 years. So I would say trade some draft capital now, build around and see what you can do with this young core in the next 4 or 5 years before they all develop and they all start needing to go elsewhere because you can't pay everybody, you know.
If
Um,
they're gonna make a move this year, like a a big move, I would say probably be at the four, and find themselves a stretch four to improve on Tobias Harris. Tobias Harris is a nice role player, and he played well for them for the most part for what he was asked to do. But I think that's definitely a position where they can improve and get better. And if they could get a four that can consistently shoot from the outside, that would be huge because then you can keep Duran inside. With everything that he brings to the table, like his ability at the rim with the alley oops and the putbacks and everything, you can keep him inside. But if you can have a four on the outside, and shooting threes consistently, that would be huge with everything that Cade can do in terms of his driving ability. Forces defenses to collapse, and they got to cover for Dern because of his alley-oop ability. You saw how many times Cade Cunningham would just throw it up to him. It's like
oh,
just
that guy,
jump
that
out of
was
the
so
gym
fun
and
to
put it
watch.
down. So you have to, as a defense, you have to collapse and defend against that. That opens up the outside. So the stretch four would be huge.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Well, it's coming up, man. The NBA draft is on the way, and then followed by free agency, and that's one thing the NBA does well, man. They own their own offseason, and like no other. Um,
Well, the NFL does a pretty good job.
well, not as far as like trade, well, free agency for sure, but even that, not nearly as
The draft, having a whole night dedicated to
well.
them
The
so they can
the
announce their
draft for
schedule.
sure, man. The NFL
Like
draft,
they
yeah,
they control the off season
it's a
pretty dang
fun.
well.
Yeah. But I just mean like the NBA does it as well though. Well, the draft I guess isn't exciting as the NFL draft because there's more impact players getting drafted in the NFL, than there is the NBA. But I just mean like with all of it combined with the between the draft, trades, and free agency, the NBA keeps things pretty interesting in their offseason.
Yeah, with trades for
So,
sure. Trades in the NBA are definitely a lot more frequent, definitely just huge when they happen. A lot of people I mean, the Doncic trade was out of nowhere, right? And just unbelievable. I mean, that dominated the news feed for a while with what they with that move. So they
yeah.
definitely, when it comes to trades, they're definitely they might be the best when it comes to
Yeah.
that.
So yeah, so that's like I was saying. So it's gonna be fun to see what the Pistons do in this offseason because of the position they're in. They're in a pretty unique position where um, there's a lot they can do.
Yeah. Like if
So
they don't do anything, like if they just brought back pretty much, they have a couple free agents in Schroeder and Beasley and Hardaway Jr.
yeah,
And they're not going to bring back all three of those guys, especially with Ivy coming back. Some of those guys are going to be gone, but for the most part, they could just bring back this entire roster, and I don't think any of us would be that disappointed. Like we'd be
yeah,
excited about what this team has going forward because they were just so exciting last year, and they're so young, and
yeah,
and like we said, Ivy's coming back, so. Regardless of what happens, hopefully they make a move, hopefully they add and improve this roster. But regardless, they're going to be exciting, and there's going to be a lot of excitement for this team going into this next season.
yeah. There's no doubt about it. All right, bud. I think we can wrap it up there.
One
Uh,
thing I want to add before
yeah,
we leave, as we are recording, we probably can hear the storms
yeah.
around us as we're recording. Skubal was supposed to pitch tonight. Skeens is supposed to pitch tomorrow for Pittsburgh. If this game gets rained out, we potentially could get the Skubal Skeens matchup tomorrow afternoon, Thursday. So
Oh, that would be fun.
pretty exciting. I don't root for rainouts, but this would be one occasion where I am rooting for the Tiger game to get rain out tomorrow, and hopefully the managers are smart enough, like, hey, they're both pitching Thursday. Let's just match them up. Like game
Yeah,
one, match them up together. Let's go. So we'll see.
that
So it's something to monitor tonight. If that game gets rained out, because I did put that out on Facebook and it went haywire. People talking about it. I mentioned like, hey, this was a few days ago. I said, hey, this is the matchup. Skubal's scheduled to pitch on Wednesday. Skeens on Thursday. Should the Tigers think about maybe adding an extra rest day and move Skubal to Thursday so we can get this monster matchup? Well, they didn't plan it that way, but the baseball gods might be stepping in and giving us the matchup we all want. So
That would be something else, man. That'd be must see baseball, man. That's for sure. But all right, man, let's cross our fingers on that one. Unless you're supposed to go to the game tonight, man, because
Yeah, well, yeah. For those that got tickets tonight and can't make it tomorrow because they got work, then yeah, that would suck. I
yeah.
apologize to you guys, but the rest of us want this matchup.
Yeah. All right, buddy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, for Dan Murphy, my name is Tom Murphy Jr., and this is the Detroit Sit Down.